roommate. Lawyer in Vegas, one of the largest states in Nevada state history, $165 million. So we're buying a total.
But what was the case? Like,
It's a very famous club. It's a cosmopolitan club is day and night.
Quick description, quick sentence. A club? He helped the club?
No, the client went into the club, there was a dispute over the bill, the client got hurt, and they sued the club for a lot of money, and the award was $150 million.
Wow, and is the person okay, or they're really...
Yeah, they're okay.
Wow, I would think if they were completely disabled, they would get that much money. That's pretty interesting.
It was great, it was a great interview, but it's okay.
Interesting. All right. Well, it's hot. It's summertime, but because of my mold, I don't even need an air conditioner. It's like natural coldness here. I live in a cave. So what's going on in Vegas? You're doing that, and what else?
So I'm leaving Vegas tonight to go to see my son in New York. Tomorrow night I'll be in New York City.
Oh, wow.
I'll be there. Then I'll be to go down to Brigantine, which is like Atlantic City, for Shabbat, and see my parents with my son and my brother. And then Monday into New York. Ooh, very exciting. You know who I'm going to be Monday and have lunch with? Jim White.
Oh, wow. Maybe I'll crash your lunch.
You're going to be in New York on Monday?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll let you know where we are.
All right. I'm going to the dentist. All right. On that note, this is Alyssa. Hi, it's Alyssa.
And hi, it's Seth from Vegas. And we're
live from, oh God, I can't do this. Why I'm rusty. All right, hi, it's Alyssa.
And it's Seth from Vegas. And we're Short Hills
live in the Middle East. We're back to our ghetto mode because we are in summer travel mode. But nonetheless, we're keeping up the communications and the conversation. Seth is making millions in Vegas. He's just playing the slots and craps. That's such a weird name, craps. Do you play? Do you gamble?
I played some blackjack since I've been here, just socially. I really like poker, but I haven't played any. I really haven't gambled at all. I've been in the sports book a few times, but I really haven't gambled. I've really been here for business.
What is social gambling? What is that?
Like, you go out, you have a few drinks, you play blackjack, you sat at a very low table, like it was $10 bets, so you could sit there all night and
get free drinks.
Get free drinks, and I think I sat down with $100 and made $150.
Okay, but that was your entertainment, so you got your money back. You got paid to entertain yourself.
Right, and if I had lost $100, that would be okay too.
So we put out a podcast, and it was during Pride time, right after Pride, and you had a lot of large comments. And in the last week, I've done is it called due diligence when you go out and you try to find out some more information? So I wanted to put a few things out there. Number one, homosexuality is no longer considered a mental illness in the psychiatric field. The only thing in the psychiatric field that has anything to do with homosexuality is body dysphoria, meaning you don't feel that it's your body or you're not feeling good in your body. That is the only thing that comes under any psychiatric problem. So I know you said that, there was a lot of problems, so...
When I speak, I only speak for Torah. What the medical community says, I'm with you. They might say that. I'm saying, from Torah standpoint, it's not normative.
But do you think that in this day and age, like...
That, the world is flat, and Torah knew that the world was round from the beginning. Torah was right. Torah is always right. Science is often wrong, and we only learn it later on. From an editorial standpoint, when Seth Kogan is making these large statements, he's speaking from what Torah says.
But it's sort of like you throw Torah under the bus and blame it on that to say these comments. You made many large comments. I don't know if Torah really goes off and says that a homosexual has mental disability. It's not true.
Sure, it is. It sure is.
Then I'd like you to prove it from the Torah, because there's a couple of things that I noticed. Number one, I have a dear friend's sister is the head of, God, what is it called? Shaliach for Shabbat or something. It's empowering women, and it's lesbian women that are, I mean, you know, it gets into Kabbalah, which sort of changes the direction a lot also.
Yeah.
She's considers herself an Orthodox Jewish woman. How do you take that away from her?
Because she's not. If she's a lesbian, she's not an Orthodox Jewish woman. It just doesn't work that way. Torah talks about what normative behavior is. There's normative behavior, and there's behavior outside the lines. People want to redefine it any way that they want, but it's just not true. Now, lesbianism is something different in a different category. We mentioned that last time as far as Torah is concerned. Torah speaks specifically of a man lying with another man as an abomination. That is not normative behavior. It's timeless. I mean, we know that sodomy comes from Sodom and Gomorrah, where the people were doing that type of activity. This is not a new activity. God not only said that activity is wrong, he burnt those cities to the ground.
Okay, focus back on, yeah, but you just made a comment. I told you about a very strong woman having a really productive organization.
There's a point. The strong woman is outside of Torah. Lesbianism is not Torah. It's outside of Torah. 100%.
Well, we had we had some comments that said, that compared you to Howard Stern, that said that you were so obnoxious that they turned this podcast off because they didn't want to hear about it any longer.
Okay, good. I don't believe that, because, you know, Howard Stern, and I'll take that as a compliment as far as...
See, sadly, I knew you would. Sadly, I knew you would. For me, I'm sensitive. I'm like, oh, wow.
Yeah. Okay, because, you know, Howard Stern, you know, was famous because people said that they listened because they liked what he had to say, and the people that didn't like what he had to say tuned in to hear what he was going to say next. So I believe that, you know, if you're just saying stuff that everybody else says, no one's really interested. The people that say that they won't listen, but they found what I was saying explosive or...
but I also know that you like the concept of freedom of speech and that you rely on it.
I do.
And so you are... So, I don't know, talk about that a little bit. I guess we might be jumping from the topic. I think we're going to be roaming between homosexuality and anti-Semitism today. I think these are the two subjects that seem to be popping up back and forth in the news.
Okay. So, I think, you know, there's a lot of things that call themselves Judaism that's not normative. I mean, if we're talking about Judaism from an halachic standpoint, these progressive ideas are outside normative Judaism. And people, you know, they feel nice, and people can say that they're just like gays for Gaza or lesbians for Torah, but it's bizarre behavior. It's not respectful to Hashem, the Creator, who really.
But aren't we evolving? Aren't we evolving as a people? Haven't we?
Evolve. We're exactly the same. There's no evolving. People are making the same mistakes that they made 3,000 years ago. As I pointed out, you know, in the Torah, people had homosexual activity. God really frowns upon it. Sodomy comes from the Torah.
I heard you. Again, I'm going to keep cutting you, because if you keep repeating yourself, we're not having a dialogue. It's you being a robot.
I find that a little bit. I find it a little bit rude. If you're asking me a question, I'm going to tell you where it comes from.
I got it. As a people, let's take the example of when we were growing up. If there was a gay teacher, it was like, oh, the teacher is gay, and everybody would talk about it like it was something. Well, now it's so normal. We all look forward to having a gay teacher. What's the problem? It's just more color, more diversity, more open-minded children. And people don't mind having a gay guy teach their children. Why should it matter if they're a good educator? So I'm a little bit lost. Haven't we evolved as a Jewish people to come to a place where there is an acceptance of all people?
No, there you just slipped it in. If you want to talk about where society has come to an understanding that it's, you know, okay, I might agree with that. If you're going to say as a Jewish people or as a Torah of accepting of it, completely not. You might find some Jews that say that, but that's not normative Judaism.
Okay, so I spoke about last time about being, you know, as long as you keep holding to this Torah thing. In the same sentence, you were like, Israel's not led by Torah law. So I'm a little bit confused. how is Israel led by? Is it led by Jewish values? Is it led by Torah law? Then you can understand marriage. Wait one second. You can understand marriage as being a direct result of, I don't know, something Jewish. So I spoke to a guy and he said, I want to marry my boyfriend. I want a ketubah. This is that part where I'm confused. But what about if gay couples in Israel can marry civilly? But then again, I don't think secular couples can really marry civilly either.
Of course not. So it's a secular country. It's definitely not ruled by Torah law. And what's interesting about that is, I think that people who are progressive, are oftentimes against the institutions that they feel constrain them. Marriage being one of them. I don't know why they want to be progressive and at the same time, want to get married. Why is that interesting to them? Why don't I just live together and have a civil marriage?
I think again you're putting a judgment back onto something that you don't fully understand. It's not, listen, unless you deal with it directly, and obviously you don't really have a connection with the homosexual world, but
I will say this.
If you have your children or someone else's children or anything, I mean, it's a human being at the end of the day. It's
of course, and I would say, and I said it last time, when I was not a Shabbos observer, I still knew that I was doing something against Torah. If I eat shrimp, I don't pretend that the Torah says it's okay to eat shrimp and pork. If I'm doing something gay, I don't pretend that the Torah says, because it makes me feel better, that I'm doing something that Torah says. I might still do it, but I'm at least honest enough to say that that's outside the bounds.
But why can't a gay couple get married in Israel if it's not Torah law?
Well, first of all, secularly, that's a different issue. You're talking about Torah. I don't decide what the secular state decides how the marriage laws work or not. I'm specifically talking about Torah. Torah says I can't eat pig, right? I can't say I eat pig and therefore I'm conforming to the laws of Torah. Torah says I can't sleep with a man.
I got it. I understand. I hear you. You keep repeating the same concept. I really get it. I believe it because I turned around to some people and I'm like, but if you want a ketubah, then it's not really Jewish. It's not a Jewish thing. What I'm saying to you, let's get out of that. Why in Israel then? I mean, in America, I'm across the board, gay marriage, not a problem. In Israel, I thought it was run by the Rabbanut. So that is where I became a little bit murky. But if a couple can come into Israel and be married, so I don't understand.
It's very difficult. The marriage ceremony, as far as I understand it, I'm not an expert, is run by the Rabbanut. And it makes it very difficult for Jews to get married to other Jews, let alone, certainly it's not going to recognize, since the marriage in Israel, if I don't have a proper ketubah or I can't prove that my parents were Jewish, the Rabbanut might not marry me to another Jew. Right. People often leave Israel to get married in Cyprus and things like that because they don't want to deal. This is conventional
marriage. Which is what I spoke to this gay couple about, and I said, it's like it's in America, but they turn around and they say it's not fair. I live here. This is where I want to be married. I mean, maybe that they get married, but not with a rabbi, not under Jewish law.
Exactly. That's all. So
okay, but then why doesn't Israel recognize gay marriage?
Because you just said marriage is run by the Rabbanut, and Torah doesn't recognize gay marriage.
But you just said that Israel's not run by Torah law.
It's not, but marriage happens to be at the moment. They gave that authority to the Rabbanut.
Yeah, it's interesting. Why it went that way. So
it's not Torah law doesn't run everything, but in the case of marriage, they did give that institution to the Rabbanut, and they're pretty strict about it. But they're not strict against gays, they're strict against Jews. If a Jew can't prove that he's Jewish, he can't get married in Israel.
Well, it was interesting because the guy that I spoke to wanted to marry a non-Jewish guy, and he said, I'm going to have an interfaith wedding in America. And I said, that's great. And I said, I don't really understand what you're asking for. If you want an interfaith wedding to begin with, that's not really an Orthodox, that's not really a Jewish wedding, that's an interfaith. Right. That's something very different. And so I don't know, maybe if it's two Jewish guys getting married, I understand it's against Torah law.
Yeah, two Jewish guys, if they're not going to marry two Jews together, a man and a woman, because they're not both Jewish, they're certainly not going to marry two men together.
But I do believe there needs to be more clarity about some things in Judaism, really, because there was something that happened. Did you hear what happened in the army that and I'm pretty sure it was a Russian guy, fully knowing the kosher law, the kashrut. He put milk and meat together in the refrigerator in the army base, and he was punished. And the ministries of Knesset, the MKs that were Russian, went up and started screaming and yelling and making comments and, derogatory comments about the government and the way it was being led. And I was really offended, to be honest, because I think a lot of Russians are coming here not because of their Jewish values, not because of anything Jewish, but because it's a better life here. And there's an opportunity.
I think that that's true. I think there are many Russians that pretended to be Jewish because the life in Israel was better than Russia, and fully made up the fact that they were Jewish to get into the country.
And Israel, there's a leniency, whereas I have to show a direct connection with my mother, with the ketubah. They can go back, I think, 2 generations. And it made it so that it got a very, very, blurred the lines completely. I mean, I met a girl, she's like, I'm not Jewish, I have a free education. She was completely living off the Israeli system. So, I don't think they're under the ketubah and all the wedding laws either when there's a Russian like that. They're not considered Jewish, although they're in the army.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on how marriage actually works in Israel, but, there are complications.
There is complications all the time.
Yeah. But I think, one of the things we wanted to talk a little bit about that we had mentioned was that this ongoing conversation that you and I feel that this is an important venue and an ongoing conversation because we don't always agree. You have an opinion, I have an opinion. And I think that when someone comments and says, I'm not going to listen to the podcast, or I'm not going to listen to the podcast because only I want to listen to things that I agree with, I think that that's problematic. Maybe we need to have a segment in the podcast where people can ask questions when they disagree.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to always get that interaction going, but I was a little bit taken back. As an educated person, I would wonder, wow, I'm hearing something I don't like. Why don't I like it? Why doesn't this sit well with me? And there's 2 people in a conversation. It's not like you're just making these comments and I'm like, yeah, they're this, that. No way. I have a big problem with a lot of things that you said. And I went back and I, thought about a lot of things and they weren't sitting well with me, but that didn't say to me, wow, I don't want to talk to you ever again. It made me say, let's keep talking. Come on, let's keep this dialogue going.
Okay.
So
I don't mind. I'm pretty firm in what I believe, and
so if people have an issue, I'd love for them to chime in. Please make a comment and let's start the dialogue outside of the cast. I want to just bring up 2 things. I want to bring up John Cusack, and I want to bring up this woman. I don't know what to call her. This AOC, this Alexandria Cortez. She's nonstop. If it's not like blatant anti-Semitism, now she's sort of playing to the delusional liberal Jew in America by chiming in about concentration camps and then kind of pushing in the word never again and then saying, no, there's a historian that defines it as the concentration camp system. Well, that's not what she said, and never again is something very clearly with a connection to the Holocaust and the Shoah. It's crazy.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. Let her speak. I think, she makes herself look silly, and again...
She's not going anyplace. She's sticking around.
Yeah. And she's supported by many Jews who, despite what she says, will vote for her, so shame on them.
Yeah, I guess that's how we should do it. I truly believe, and it's funny, I just saw someone else reiterate exactly what I wrote. Shocking, is that she purely says things for sensationalism and publicity, and she gets it. It's interesting. She's very well rehearsed when she's in the hearings and Senates, things like this I've noticed. But when she goes off on things, she doesn't really pull it together as well.
No, I think that she's not really ready for prime time. I would agree with that. When she's rehearsed and has her talking points, she can say things that sound reasonable.
She was definitely trained. She was really, really trained.
Yes. Well, they said that they picked her. It was sort of like
an audition.
Couch. Yeah, an audition.
Yeah, because I'm just watching some things lately and I'm like, wow, it's really not together. Because, when she's in those hearings, I was like, damn, the girl's, she's really plays it well and everything well rehearsed.
What's shocking is that she says things that are really against Jewish interests, and she has Jewish supporters. So
Well,
these are the same lefty,
Ilhan,
liberal
Ilhan.
lesbians.
Ilhan. So does Ilhan. She also has in
Yeah.
Minnesota a following of Jewish communities. It's completely shocking.
Yep. Jews get out of the America. That's my thing.
Yeah, I hear you. And now, John Cusack, I mean, I don't think the guy's ever been to Israel. How does he go and pass such a image and not think it's going to get any kind of
I don't know,
backlash?
he's like he hasn't made a good movie since The Sure Thing, so
So he's a publicity seeker.
maybe.
Well, you know, it's interesting when people say that Jews run the country and Jews run the banking and Jews run Hollywood. How someone like John Cusack, who would like to be, you know, seen in Hollywood, makes such an anti-Semitic comment, and if you tell me that kind of causes him to get job opportunities, I'm shocked.
I don't think it causes him, but maybe he's bitter because he hasn't gotten real work in a while.
So it's the fault of the Jew.
That's right.
Wow. You know, I'm besides being a Jew, my nature seems to get scapegoated. I think people should just blame me for everything.
Nah, you're blameless.
I'm blameless. Oh God, I don't think so. You know, we can make this short and sweet. Do you have any other insights you'd like to share with me?
No, let's no. We just wanted to say hello. It's summertime.
Yeah.
When there's all this things, I want to wish you well in your travels. Maybe I'm going to see you in New York because you're headed.
Well, that would be fun to see Whitey. Wait, don't tell Whitey. Let's if it happens, I'll just pop up and be like, hey.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm
Okay.
headed lunch with Whitey on Monday.
Okay.
And I'm headed from Vegas to New York, which is east, and you're headed
Okay,
west.
you don't need to do directions. Anyway, if not, worst comes to worst, we'll wave in the plane and as you fly by. So I want to wish you luck in Vegas. Could you play the Elvis machine already? And we forgot last time, but shalom, shalom, and shalom can be high, and shalom can be bye.
All right, bye, sweetie.
See you, lots of light. Good luck and have a good trip. Say hi to your parents and family. Bye-bye.